Dusk folds over the ridges above Shimla, and the forest is no longer Greenwich, a simmering, breathing thing. The pines hiss as resin ignites, needle beds run like candle wax, and the dry wind throws embers downslope like a fistful of stars. A line of villagers beats the fire with green branches until their arms tremble. Smoke thickens in the gullies. Somewhere up a slope a leopard coughs and flees. Somewhere below, in a valley threaded by the Sutlej, the air smells of tar, pine, and something older, like burnt time. Keep the flank. Don't let it cross the cart track. Shouts Suman Thakur, range forest officer, voice muffled by a soot-black scarf. She is 32 and has learned the color of fear in the whites of other people's eyes. Two men with backpack pumps stumble beside her. Another drags a line of scraped earth until the metal sinks against rock. It's early June, pre-monsoon, when the mountains dry into tinder. This year it came earlier, harder. Winter snow arrived late, a brittle crust that never fed the springs. April heat broke records. Now, more than 1,000 fires have crawled through Himal's lower belts in a few weeks, flaring in chirpine, stalking oak fringes, licking up to orchards where the apples hang small and thirsty. Up on the saddle, Ashanegi watches blue flames crawl under a stone wall toward her family's orchard. Her grandfather built terraces here when the winters were fat and long. Apples once blushed lower, in belts, now given to heat and hail. She slaps a burning tuft with a broom of green oak. Sparks land on her shawl. She doesn't notice. The wind shifts with a predatoress patience and drives the fire toward the road that switchbacks down to Canigate. Across the valley, a helicopter tilts into the smoke, a gray insect with a bucket swinging under its belly. The pilot bites the slope, releases a torrent. The drop hisses, then vanishes in steam and cheers that turn to coughing. On the road, a bus slows, faces pressed to the glass. One of them, a driver on his brake, rests his head on the wheel and watches orange tongues write their shaky script across the ridge he has climbed 1,000 times. Rajiv Verma knows this road like his father's hands. What he cannot decipher is why the seasons no longer behave like the mountains taught him. Winter, spring, brief, glowing summer, then rains. Instead, the forest burns deep into June. And always, after fire, rain finds the ash. Past midnight the wind drops. The fire makes its own weather now, breathing in and roaring out as it eats up old pine litter and plantations that stand like oil on sticks. Men and women old and young shovel dirt, cut fuel breaks, call through the dark. Suman wipes sweat and ash from her eyes with the back of a glove and does the math in her head. 2 more ridges going. Radius complaining about battery. A second chopper promised for dawn. One crew cut off by a holler of flame in a ravine. In the near distance, bells tinkle from a small hill temple where people have brought water and prayers. She has seen this ritual before. It calms hands enough to work. By dawn, the fire has sheared off a slope, leaving it black and crumbly as cake. The line holds, the bucket ship thumps in, drops another load at the upwind edge. Suman tastes relief and dust. We've got it, someone says, and edges sink to smoke. But then her radio crackles another ignition down valley, and beyond it, another. Cedar crowns are safe up high, but between them and the road is a wide brown belt of pine. Fires multiply in heat like breath on glass. Days blur into a looping sequence. Slash, stomp, scrape, collapse. Broken lines and mended, wells gone dry. Smoke scummed across villages. In Solan district, a wall of poplars stumps out a creeping fire. In Kangra, volunteers wrap cloths around their heads and beat at flames. Add pop cones and send seeds on tiny spinning wings across blackness. In Bilaspea, a boy's hands shake holding a plastic bucket, eyes huge and a face dusted gray. On the highway, an army convoy idles. The driver returns from a tea stall, shakes his head. Used to be snowmelt smell this time of year, he says to no one in particular. Now, it's like Delhi in December. At noon on a Wednesday, with smoke layered like fog in the valley, the first thunderheads sprout behind the light, eager as a promise. strobes in their bellies. By evening, they have coalesced into the kind of bruised, blue cloud that belongs to July, not June. Wind flips the leaves on the silver oaks. Birds drop to the lower branches, silent. On the ridge a world away and just above, an IMD radar at Kufri throws its invisible eye into the newborn storm. On radio nets and WhatsApp groups used as lifelines by district officers and village ward members, the warning phrases flower. Strong gusts. Embedded cells. Localized cloudbursts. People breathe in the hot dust. Then the first cool, fat drops. Rain that begins on ash makes a pace that doesn't hold. It slides off terraces, finds old gullies long asleep, and wakes them like snakes. Asha smells petrichor and something else. With cinders, she hears the fine rasp of soil moving. Then a bigger sound, throatier. Suman feels the weight in the ground shift under her boots. Rajiv, pushing his empty bus around a curve toward Parwanu, watches a thin ribbon of soil peel off a cut slope and fall as if pulled. In the temple at Summerhill, bells move uneasily in a new wind. Meera Joshi, a teacher who comes each evening after classes to light a lamp, looks through a crack in the door at rain that threads into a sheet, at a slope across the ravine that burned 3 days ago and now glistens with a skin of black mud. She lights the wick anyway. You keep faith. That is what elders taught her. Outside, the earth makes a sound like a long-held breath let go, and Suman turns her head toward a ridge that is beginning to move. And when a mountain moves, it does not shout. It whispers first, and then it all happens at once. The scrub tears free. The fire-black soil liquefies, riding on the rain-glazed bed below. A rock, big as a car, flexes from the slope's shoulder and lumbers forward, killing shrubs just by brushing them. Suman runs not away, but along the line where the slope may. Tibshi can already see the route the debris wants to take and screams at a crew to clear that culvert before the jam. Catches before the runoff sides around and takes the road. Rain needles her face. Radios hiss with half-message. Sladnir Sanjali, Nalagon Rogue, near Mandi, fresh scar above Theog. The mountain has become a network of moving parts. Every cut slope a question. Every culvert a coin toss. People with torches stand on a narrow road edge near Solon and watch as mud paints the asphalt with a brown tongue that grows and grows until the road is a memory. A bike slips and goes over. The rider clings to a bush by his elbows while strangers lay down to reach him, their bodies gravity's rope. On the Kullu Manali highway, the bees speaks more loudly by the minute. The water is the color of tea and throws trees against its own banks, as if retrieving something. Rajiv eases the bus onto a turnout and watches a hotel lean and a balcony fall cleanly into the current. There is a horror to such elegance. He feels it in the pit of him. The old fear that grew inside when a hillside above Nigelsari let go in a roar 3 summers back and swallowed a bus like his. He sleeps with that sound sometimes. Now the river hammers rocks together in a note he recognizes. Too high, too swift. By midnight, the highway is severed in 3 places, which 3 changes by the hour. Barreaux, crews, in fluorescent vests, move in sculptures of rainlet spray, pushing boulders with dozers, curling mud with blades. They stop for surges. They stop for the ground to remember its shape. The Pando dam Sirentes, and then wails along. Liquid note that goes from the valley floor to the empty air above. Instructions roll over WhatsApp. Don't approach riverbanks. If you're in low-lying sections of Mandi district, move to higher ground. Gates may open depending on inflow. The words depending and inflows don't mean much to the men at the river SA who have come to watch water. Do what it has always done, but not like this. In Bilospur, a lane points directly at the soot ledge, and a family stacks their chairs up against their door in a gesture of hope too old and too new. Up in ramping orchards above Kotkai, hail rides in with the rain, white beads in black mud, sneaking under nets. Ash's father at the window lights a beady and stares at exactly what he cannot afford. The small URS work smudged into the ground by water that months ago refused to fall. Tuesday's dawn arrives as if it has been ground underfoot. The sky is the blank of wetted slate. In Shimla, slides have chewed the city along the lines where hillsides were cut to make room for more roofs, more cars, more shops. In certain neighborhoods, the earth has rehearsed for years, slumping in small tantrums every monsoon, but there is a new appetite in it this week. Mira closes the classroom early. A student's mother arrives, wrapped in a shawl heavy with rain, and says, "You will not walk home alone." Mira's temple is up the slope. Just a little. Just a place to leave the worry and pick up courage. The bells from last night sound wrong in her memory. She holds them in her mind anyway, as if she could anchor them by imagining their music. Around noon, the IMD forecaster in Kufri watches a storm cell split and rejoin on her screen, then grow a bright core like a heart. She sends out the internal note that becomes a retry of the warning most people have already heard. Heavy to very heavy rainfall at isolated places. High vulnerability of landslides where vegetation has burned, heightened flash flood risk in narrow catchments. She steps back from the console and looks at the rain on the cedar needles outside. Beads running down and gathering at the tips, letting go and falling. The science in the machine says the patterns are changing. The eyes at the window see only the same grace and threat that have always been here. Between those two is a decision about how we build and where we stand. In Solines Hills, a cloudburst finds a dry stream and persuades it to be a river again. In villages, word travels. Leave the temple if you've taken shelter there. Move to the school built on the spur. Don't trust the retaining wall behind the older houses. People lift trunks onto beds and carry sleeping children under shawls. Suman's team, now a landslide response crew, works with Sapa tools and borrowed ropes and knowledge earned the hard way. The slope that burned is slicker than others. Roots are ash threads, not grips. She recognizes a face in a doorway, the woman who handed her water during the fire. The woman raises her hand to wave or to ward off, and in the same breath looks past Suman, up, where a line appears where there was none a minute ago. A darker green breaking into movement. Mira steps into the temple porch, shakes her shawl. A priest collects utensils, kitchen stuff, the little things that make worship comfortable, throws them into a plastic tub. The earth shifts softly under the floor, more suggestion than motion. A man says, "It's fine. This temple has stood 100 years." Another says, "The hillside above burned. You cannot trust the soil." Rain runs from the porch to the steps in steady sheets. Shoes clump there, wet, waiting. Somewhere, deep in the slope, a clay layer takes in more water than it can bear. Above it, 100,000 small stones all listen at once. Down in the river valley, a longhorn from the dam pulses. On the radio, a district officer says, again and again, "Move. Move now." On a ridge road, a bus idles, because its driver doesn't dare accelerate into a curve he cannot see beyond. Rajiv holds the wheel as if keeping a promise. He remembers the noise from Nigelsara Rock meeting air staying in his chest. He forces his breath out. On a knot of hill in Shimla, the temple bells jump all at once of their own accord, a percussive stutter that sounds almost like a call for help. And the back wall, which last night was made of quiet and belief, bulges as if it too is trying to breathe, and breath becomes roar. The far slope lets go first. Black-brown mud unfurling, gathering boulders like teeth. Then the near ground obeys gravity's old law. The temple's rear wall shears, roof tiles, skid like fish. Pillars topple in a chain that sounds like the world is emptying its pockets of stone. People run for the doorway, the one that a minute ago led to a narrow lane and now is also a veil of water. Mira hears a sharp crack and knows it is a beam, not lightning. She doesn't remember the moment she chooses. Only the weight of a child in her arms, wet cloth slapping her ankles, and then the air itself full of grit, so fine it's like breathing sand. After the noise comes the feeling of being underwater while not being in water. Then hands pull, push, tear her from the edge of something that wants to make her part of itself. She lands in the lane on her elbows. The lantern glass and the priest's tub shatters at her feet. Where the sanctuary S-front used to be is now a torn lip with a tongue of mud lolling out, dragging shawls, lamps, small gods with bright paint and steel eyes. A man screams a name until it is only noise. Another calls into a phone that isn't connecting. The bells hang at wild angles, their cords taut like veins. By afternoon, the neighborhood becomes a dig. NDRF teams in helmets and blue roll, and with probes, way too late, and exactly when human arms begin to fail. An abrupt, quiet falls. Mud is moved by hand, by bucket, by prayer. The tally of rescued and recovered begins and does not stop until a number appears that everyone will carry differently. Out beyond the noise, on other slopes, other blows land. A house in Fagli buckles, a hillside near Krishnanagar folds, a road section in Mandigos, missing between breakfast and tea. These names will occupy paragraphs and afterlives, in local memory. Taken together, they are a breaking point. A feeling and a state where the mountain is both faith and fate, that something deeper than rain has shifted. In Kullu, the bees drops hotels like teeth. A hunk of riverfront that tourists posed against last winter is gone as if edited. Videos shot from balconies show the last moments of railings, chairs, shrubs, planted to soften the edge, all leaping into water. A tourist from the plains sobs in a lobby. A local man pats his shoulder and says, gently, "This is the river living, not dying." It's consolation and warning both. Up near Pando, strobe lights flash in rain as the sluices manage volumes older, faster, browner than anyone expected by mid. Loudspeakers repeat in Hindi and in the particular Himachali bend of it. Go up, stay away. Don't make the river your spectacle. Suman kneels in a wet chute, hacking roots away to snake a rope under a jackstraw of logs and rebar. Ash from last week's fire stains, everything with a sick gray. NGOs from the city arrive with biscuits and tarpaulins and a certain look in their eyes. The shock city people get when mountains show their muscles. A contractor gestures at a retaining wall and says, "We built to code." A structural engineer rubs the wall's face like an old mule and says, "What?" The hillside answers with another small, punishing slide. When Reggie finally moves the bus, he inches around a bend where the road rests on a shelf, cut too deep too fast. In the years the highway was widened, he traveled that work as noise from mudstone breakers spitting dust, excavators biting. The mountain opened like surgery with no anesthetic. It made the journey faster. The fares more doable. It also left the road sleeping on a bench that will always want to sag where monsoon lives. He passes a place where a souvenir stall stood in spring. Now there's only a smudge and a runout. He whistles through his teeth without meaning to. The sound his father used to make when a truck came too close to the edge. Up in Kufri, the radar sees the worst of the cell move on, a belly of red and purple pixels sliding toward the plains, where drenched wheat and half-built flyovers wait. The forecast desk notes what the eye cannot parse. Records gone. In July, state rainfall in a 72-hour window exceeded anything in a lifetime remembered by elders. In August, it did it again. The IMD will publish figures % of normal, anomaly maps but inside homes. The mathematics is simpler. People will fold clothes and puja books into plastic. Lift them higher next time. They will sleep with an ear tilted to the damp wall. In orchard belts climbing higher, two kinds of ladders are at work. One is the bamboo ladder men use to pick apples from branches that have learned to hold fruit later in the year now, as summers get hot and confused and hail rides into September. The other is a ladder of livelihood, an invisible thing, rungs moving uphill as climate warms. Old apple villages plant peas or tourism. Old pea villagers plant apples. Above all that, glaciers shrink back in postcards and in measurements pulled by surveyors over blue ice. In 2021, a cloudburst up in Lahore chewed a motor road into steps and took 7 lives that had names and faces like those here. This year, warnings about glacial lakes pooling behind rubled dams hum in bureaucratic memos, like a distant dynamo. It is tempting to say the mountain has always done this, and it has, but in 4 monsoons, the pattern has sharpened. Rainfall comes in short, punishing bursts. Long dry spells feed fire. Fire burns root mats into gauze. Gals cannot hold a hill in place. Cut slopes expose hungers in the earth. Riverbeds, narrowed by buildings, push water into speed. And always, more people, more roads, more machines that give and take. At dusk, 2 days after the temple went down, Mira walks to a stretch of slope that remains. She does not bring a lamp. She puts her hand on a cedar trunk that stands like a sentence left unfinished. She speaks softly to it because that is what she has always done in times past. The cedar does what trees do, listens in its own way. Close by, a man named Dorj, who brings wool from Lahal to sell when the pass is open, spits into the rain and looks toward the direction of the Adel tunnel. He hears a sound that is not rain or river. It is a heavier, rounder rumble, a bowling of stones in a high, unseen channel. He thinks of the flats below Sisu where, in summer, children run like deer. He thinks of the tongue of the Chinab and the stories his grandfather told about the year water turned the color of soil and stayed that way for weeks. The rain doesn't finish. It changes shape. A helicopter beats the air somewhere. In a control room beside a concrete river, a hydropower engineer stares at screens that tell him what the Sutlej wants. His name is Arjan. He knows the urge of a river to go where a river has always gone. And he knows the geometries of gates and turbines and numbers that try to discipline the word urge into megawatts and MCM. He also knows that upstream 100 small slopes, like the one that took the temple, are moving when you look away, and that each will contribute a slice of mountain to what comes down. He leans closer to the microphone that connects him to men in the dark with loud hailers, and he says, once, clearly, "Prepare to warn again, because the valley will only hear you if you start before thunder takes the rest of the sky." The dam horn's note sweeps across water, bounces off hills like a migrating bird. Villages lean toward the sound. People know the difference between a siren for a test and a siren for opening. They drag charpoys and plastic tubs up a slope, the way they have done during this monsoon and the last and the one before it. They go not because anyone believes concrete gates and men made of alarm will betray them tonight, but because they remember how quickly a familiar river grows unfamiliar. Suman watches men move a line of goats across a temporary bamboo bridge and thinks how everything here is temporary dressed up as ancient. Himalayan nights are louder in flood. The river deepens its voice, moves from song to drum. Tirades of water rip grass out by the roots along the banks. In Mandi, a market that smelled 2 days ago of spices and damp cloth now smells of rust and goat oil. Loudspeakers roll the words, "Pando may release, Nathpa downstream will calibrate." Stay away from Sutlej banks. In the concrete halls of the hydropower complex, Arjun moves through procedures written after other floods. Red and green lights hold him like eyes. In one window, he watches telemetry climb at remote gauges numbers with names: Wangtu, Rampur, Sunni. Upstream, the roar outside is a physical thing, like the weight of a man against your shoulder. Higher up in Lahal, Dorj moves along a path he can find with his eyes closed after a life on it. The rumble he heard this afternoon has matured into something he respects. A new stream taking shape or an old stream remembering itself. The Atal tunnel is a dark mouth plugged with headlights and orders. Barrow men in orange and green wave torches and arcs and confer in terse phrases. On the other side, toward Keelong tourists, and sneakers learn a mountain vocabulary fast. Wait, turn back. No, not now. Go there. Dorj watches the Chandra, where it throws stones against itself and braids into wild white. A boulder the size of a tractor hurls forward and stops, as if it had decided something. He thinks, not for the first time. It's not the slope that moves. It's the whole story moving. The black slopes that burned last week between Solin and Shimla are now cutting themselves apart. Fire took the underbrush. Rain finds the straightest line. In a village above Dharampa, a retaining wall with rebar hair leans like a tired man. Children do not kick at it. They have been told not to touch the skin of the hill. In Kangra, terraces slide in sheets, rice seedlings making a pattern like green breath stopped mid-exhale. In Sirmore, a gully chews itself into a canyon in 40 minutes. On the Chandigarh-Shimla highway, honkin becomes a form of prayer in the Arma, a form of grace as a convoy with food and diesel creeps past. Places where tarmac has been replaced with the kind of glistening clay you have in nightmares. Arjun's phone is a chorus. State control room, district magistrate, IMD bulletins, a text from his wife, with a photo of their daughter asleep, with a flashlight still burning under her chin like a lantern in a shrine. He pockets it and tunes his ear to be 2 places at once. The tug of war between keeping the reservoir below danger and not sending a surge to it. Hamlet that believes in evening washes and stories at the water's edge is not academic. It's measured in lamp-black and steel and, after, in numbers that attach to grief. On a spur near Sunni, loudspeakers atop a bolero announce the risk in a rhythm people have come to know. Words. Pause. Horn. Words. Again, down by the gravel bar, two teenagers drink in the moment anyway, because they are 17 and immortal for another hour. On the other side of the river, an old woman sets her steel trunk on a stool, not because 6 inches will save anything, but because the act tells her she is not yet done. Above them all, a red light blinks on a mountain, a radio tower winking across damp air. In the orchard country, Asha stands beside trees that have learned to bear their fruit a fortnight later, because the spring was too cold and then too hot, and the bloom too eager and then too battered. The monsoon is not a season to her anymore. It is a set of negotiations. She has nets against hail, drains against downpour. Insurance she does not fully trust, and a line of talkative tourists who come when snow falls on weekends and buy apple pickles and ask for selfies. She thinks of last summer when the bees kept roaring and she saw a hotel on the news in Manali drop like a cut flower. She thinks, sharply, of the men who cut the mountain for the wider road, and the way the mountain remembers. At midnight, wind slants, rain horizontal. Headlamps sweep slopes and tie circles of light to rocks for a second and move on. Suman stands on a road that has become a river and checks her people off by name. She sends a crew uphill to a cluster of houses that'll be islands by dawn. She tells the youngest boy among them, who holds the rope without looking away from it as if it is the only friend he has, that he will put the harness on himself this time. He looks up with rain in his lashes. She nods. He nods back. In the hour that happens between day and night when you don't know which way your face is turned. Arjun lifts a leaf far upstream and down. Water answers too quickly to belong to just one man's hand. In the same moment, a half-built shop along the Sutlej hears a noise and then is a memory. On a bamboo bridge above Pando, a goat bleats and freezes in the middle and then chooses the only animal thing. Forward. Its owner curses in the small voice people use for God and reaches with 2 hands like hunger. Dorj stands with his back to a boulder and watches the sky not in fear but in calibration. He knows the difference between a night that will eat the road and a night that will only bite. He hears a distant, man-made blast. Somewhere a crew has blown a new channel or a stuck boulder to dust to let a flow pass without taking a house. The sound marvels around the valley like a rumor. He tightens the laces on his boots with slow fingers, because you do not hurry the things that must hold you. The damn horn sounds again. The boys by the gravel bar get on their bikes and ride upslope, laughing too loudly. The old woman tightens her braid and puts the trunk on the charpoy. Asha tests the drainage in a trench with a stick and watches water choose. Water decide. Mira, who has not returned to the temple because there is no temple to return to, sits with a child who sleeps with grit still in her hair. Rajiv crosses himself without thinking and eases the bus through a gap that is 2 inches wider than he wants to know. All these movements, small and focused, add into a single breath that the state holds. The surge is minutes away, then seconds. There is a last set of orders on the wireless, a last look at a row of numbers, a last torch swung, a last rope tied, a last prayer whispered into a weft of rain. The river lowers its voice, and then lifts it like a giant turning in sleep. The light meant to be at the end of this tunnel of weather has not yet shone. It is the held breath before the cough, the paused bow above the string. If the flood peaks where it might, it will test everything that has been prepared, everything that has been repaired since the last time, and it will write new lines where none were. And the line that the surge writes is not neat. It curls and humps in the channel like muscle. The first shock passes and spares what someone expected to be taken. The second takes what someone insured twice. Along a bend near Rampur, logs chained for a raft fetch up and swing free, a cartoon of strength made useless. Arjun watches inflows rise, and tips release to match, like the breath of a soprano he has never heard. He does this with other men and women he cannot see, bound to a single intention. Don't let a number become a name. At the bamboo bridge, the goat makes it. The owner laughs like someone who found a coin in a pocket. In a slum near the river, a boy cries for a soaked school book, a specific grief among the general. A house on a low terrace tilts and then holds because someone long ago planted a deodar at just the right place. And the roots are a stitched net under earth you can't see across the valley. The red blink on the tower keeps time like a heart that knows panic and refuses it. Not everything holds. A footbridge in Kullu lifts and goes like a leaflet. A family's pots and a brass plate, already old when a previous flood brushed this floor in the 1980s, go floating. On the highway, a culvert plugged by last week's fire litter fails and water sides around and opens a bite so clean it looks designed. A car doesn't see it in time. Strangers shout and grab and pull children through a window. Someone ties a scarf around a cut and it turns the same color as the river. In Lahau, a patch of slope above the Chandra sloughs off without drama at 3 a.m. and a shepherd's hut gently breaks in half, as if admitting it had always wanted to be two. By dawn, the crest has passed. It does not announce that it has finished. It leaves a signature, exposed roots, weeds skinned to their spines. New sunbows where grass will start and a family will forget that this place was water just last night until the next horn reminds them. The day takes a breath. The rain continues in a form you can speak through. In the hydropower hall, Arjun leans against a wall that sweats and listens to the fatigue find his bones. He thinks of the figures it'll be in the report. Cubic meters released, levels held below marks. He knows there will be marker pin circles over parts where the calculus did not quite fit the experience. In Shimla, the ruins of the temple that fell last monsoon, and all the slides that followed it have become a place to visit, with the silence that pays respect. Mira goes there when the classes are out and stands with parents. Some days, she brings flowers. Most days, she doesn't. She looks at the line of houses beyond, at their walls repainted, a crisp band of damp rising that no paint can hide. She runs a finger along a crack and feels how the mountain is still shifting. Always, very slowly, as if revising an old sentence. Suman takes stock of blackened slopes that turned to pulp and began to slide into choreography, of cause and effect so plain you could teach it in a classroom if you could make anyone look at it the way you need to. She asks for budget for fuel breaks for pine needle collection to be made work rather than punishment. 4 controlled burns done with care in months when the forest 1T turned an entire ridge into one long fuse. She enlists village women, those who hear the forests as clearly as they hear a pressure cooker too. Patrol, in March, before the first mischief of men with matches, and boys with pride. Asha replants along the edge of a terrace that fell away in a tidy rectangle, as precise as a cut from a ruler. She chooses rootstock, someone from the horticulture department advised would handle a hotter June. She half believes that, half believes the old wisdom that says, don't plant on the lip, don't trust a spring that went dry one season, don't leave your drain unstoned. She also allows herself a thought she would have swallowed last year. What if her children do something that lets them love the mountain without bargaining with it every day? She looks uphill, further than her grandfather ever did when he thought about planting. Hotel tunnel opens to single-lane traffic. George laughs with a friend over tea so sweet it leaves grit on the teeth, and says, half joking, that roads are a promise God made to men to test a different kind of faith. He points out a slope where a line of willow cuttings has been hammered in bioengineering, the engineer had said. Sticks in patience, his grandfather would call it. He nods to the idea. He respects willows. They know how to hold by letting go, how to bend and still stand. He thinks Chandra and Bhaga will continue their marriage and their arguments, and that Chenab will carry both with the steady, married strength of something that has earned its name. Numbers assemble slowly over months. 4 monsoons and 4 pre-monsoon burns. Himachal Pradesh has paid in blood and money and time lost to waiting at hairpins. Hundreds of lives gone to rain-related disasters. 2 landslides in the afternoon and flash floods in the blue hour. To rockfall that doesn't ask who you are. Thousands of houses damaged or taken. Some labeled as fully or partially in tables that Dante measure memories stored in rooms. Road damages measured in thousands of kilometers. Costs in tens of thousands of crores over 4 years. In the fires of this summer alone, thousands of incidents, tens of thousands of hectares burned forests, turned to ash that became slurry. That became news, that became a lesson until the next page was turned by clouds. What's next is written in small acts and hard policies. It looks like hazard zonation maps put above sentiment. That line on paper strong enough to say, not here, not again. It looks like building codes with teeth and the courage to say no to a fourth floor where a slope wants to sing its own song. It looks like roads cut with benches and drains no contractor can fudge, rock bolts and mesh where they are needed, and living roots where they are better. It looks like early warnings that arrive as a light and a sound that anyone can read in the night without a phone. Doppler radars calibrated rainfall thresholds for landslides made public and believed. Sirens that cry wolf just enough to keep wolves away without making people ignore them. Next is also communal fire lines cleared before the first match flares. Pine needles made into briquettes, not tinder. Women who know the exact smell of a forest about to misbehave made central to the plan. Volunteers trained to say the simplest life-saving sentence leave now to neighbors who respect them because they share the same compound wall. Hydropower operators coordinating by protocol and by gut, releasing smoothly, warning early, measuring never against the last flood only but against the flood that didn't yet happen. Rain gardens and check dams in villages that slow water just enough to change a story. Insurance that pays out before despair sets its teeth in. A school's morning assembly that includes a glance at the hill behind it and the question, how does it look to you today? Climate has rewritten the timetable of the mountains. Apples have climbed. Snow has retreated. Fire has come 2 months that used to smell of damp moss and wood smoke from kitchens, not hillsides. The past clings like mist, but these 4 years have made the present unmistakable. In the middle of destruction are men and women whose faces you have seen in these hills every time you came. The bus driver who knows every bend by scent. The forest officer whose boots are never dry. The teacher who lights lamps even where the floor is gone. The shepherd who hears a flood before anyone else. The engineer with a graph that looks like a mountain range of its own. The season thins. The smell after rain changes. It gets sharper, with the cold threading in. A child rings a bell at a roadside shrine that's survived by half a wall, and the sound braids itself into the new year. The river lowers, and shows stones shine by the night. Above them, a slope holds, because the willow held, because a decision was made to build a wall back a little further, because a siren sent people uphill fast enough. It is not triumph. It is survival worn humbly. In another dusk, smoke will rise again. In another morning, thunder will build like rumor. Between those is a space where choices live. It is narrow. It is N-O. It is what remains when the mountain writes its lines and the people answer in theirs. In that space, a state stitches an old identity to a new climate with thread that must be strong and flexible both. They will do it in committees and by torchlight and with bare hands in mud. The mountains are not still. Neither are the people who love them. If stories like this move you, subscribe for more true events that change the world.